Hey y'all, so we're back reading Black Marxism. I hope everything is well. We are on part 3, Black Radicalism and Marxist Theory, chapter 9, Historiography in the Black Radical Tradition. Sorry. Du Bois's chapter, I just got confused. Anyways, so I'm going to read like the last paragraph because that's going to set us up for the next 3 sections. And yeah, okay. So, the first war of the world in the 20th century is a watershed for those events that directly influence the special character of the American Communist movement and the party's policies towards blacks. It was during the war, or because of the war, or the aftermath of the war that these events occurred. First, there was the transformation of international socialism. The Comintern succeeded the Second International as the leading force of the socialist movement. Second, in the United States, a black immigration from the South resulted in the formation of northern urban black communities and subsequently a new form of racial consciousness, black nationalism. Third, beginning almost simultaneously with the formation of the American Party, there was the intercession of the Comintern, Lenin and then Stalin on the Negro question. These were the critical events. It is necessary now to look at them in more detail. Then next section. Bolshevism and American Communism. Hold up. Okay, I'm gonna see. Bolshevism and American Communism. The Second International succumbed to 2 forces: nationalism and revolutionary failure. With regard to nationalism, World War I found the majority of the workers of England, Germany, France, and Austro-Hungary. For the longest time, I would pronounce it Hungary. Yeah, you know what? Hell yeah. Hungary willing to go to the battlefields under national leadership in order to fight against each other. International worker solidarity, upon which socialism was based, disintegrated. The socialist movement had failed to maintain the dichotomy between the interests of the workers and the interests of capitalist ruling classes. State nationalism had triumphed as the dominant ideology of the working classes. The pacifist tactics of the socialists had proved to be effective only in those countries that were either non-combatants or those, like the United States, which had been slow to enter the fray. Moreover, the revolutionary movements led by socialists failed. All that is but one. The Bolshevik Party had gained control over the revolutions in Russia, but in Germany, England, France, Hungary, and elsewhere. Is it Hungary? Yeah. Socialist revolutions either failed to materialize or when they did, were aborted. Thus, in the most advanced industrialized societies, the presumed site of revolution, no revolutions were brought about. No workers' movements came to power. And that's interesting, and that's interesting in terms of like looking at industrial cores versus peasant agrarian societies. And when in connection, okay, this is going to talk about it, but in connection to let me keep reading because it's gonna say it. Let me keep reading. Thus, in point of fact, the only 2 successful revolutions of the period had occurred in societies whose populations were predominantly peasants: Mexico and Russia. Not only were they predominantly peasant societies, but peasant movements had played critical roles in the triumphs of their revolutions, throwing into question the presumption that industrial workers were to be the instruments of philosophy. And then, to that point, how Du Bois looks at revolution, he talks about how like enslaved revolts were successful because they were coming from agrarian societies, peasant societies, which is it's just interesting to see those like patterns, blah 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 blah. Anyways, it is not surprising then that the organization of international socialist movement atrophied. The Second International had also come increasingly to represent or signify that revolution would come through the instruments and structures of bourgeois society, political reform through the institutions of bourgeois democracy. When the International collapsed, so did its tactical and ideological resolutions. What appeared to replace them was the Third International, dominated by Lenin and the policies of his Bolshevik cadre. Tactically, a renewed commitment to violent struggle became evident in the movement. Moreover, with the formation of the Third International, it became necessary for member national parties to pledge their loyalties to the Comintern, the Soviet Union, and in practical terms to the Bolshevik Party. The defense of the Soviet Union was to be of the highest priority. Party discipline was to conform to the dictates of the Executive Committee of the Comintern, a committee chaired by Zinoviev, Zinoviev, the second leading Bolshevik. And then there's like a quote, each party desirous of affiliating with the Communist International should be obliged to render every possible assistance to the Soviet republics of their struggle against all counter-revolutionary forces. The Communist parties should carry on a precise and definite propaganda to include the workers to refuse to transport any kind of military equipment intended for fighting against the Soviet republics, and should also be legal or illegal means also by legal or illegal means carry on a propaganda amongst the troops sent against the workers' republics, etc. All the resolutions of the congresses of the Communist International, as well as the resolutions of the Executive Committee, are binding for all parties joining the Communist International. Still, the vigor with which the Comintern pursued and institutionalized its hegemony had no immediate effect on the American Communist movement. The history and organizations of revolutionary socialists and workers' movements in the United States had been too disparate for any authority, domestic or otherwise, to impose cohesion and or subordination. The critical Am I reading the book? The crucial The crucial social basis for radical workers' movements in the United States was provided by the forces of labor recruited to American industrial production. Commenting on the first decade and a half of the 20th century, Nathan Glazer argued, one central fact about the American working class in this period and during subsequent decades too must be remembered. It was largely composed of immigrants. The working forces in the steel mills, the coal mines, the textile factories, the clothing shops were overwhelmingly foreign-born, and that part of it that was not was concentrated in supervisory jobs and the more highly paid skilled occupations. Earlier, as we have seen, the African and Afro-American agrarian workers had supplied the critical surplus value that supported the transformation of the economy into an industrialized and ultimately capital-intensive one. In turn, late 19th century European immigrants, expropriated, trained, reduced, and disciplined by European sectors of the world economy, in parentheses, in Germany, England, Ireland, and Italy primarily, constituted the labor forces uniquely developed and historically necessary for the American industrial transformation. But most of these European immigrant workers had come from societies in which labor movements were already developed. In fact, most of these movements had by the mid-19th century developed unique and particular complexes of tactics, strategies, and ideology. Whole traditions in these labor movements and oppositions in those traditions had been achieved. These were a part of the political, organizational, and ideological cultures that accompanied the foreign workers to America. Wait, let me open up my Word document. I was also working on my script for the discussion forums. I'm so excited to record those videos, guys, because I should have done that. And that person was right on that comment that he made, or they made. I don't know if it was a man or a woman, or they, them. I should have done video discussion. I will be doing that for the next book. Pinky promise. I was like, what? So I'm almost done with that, and I'm excited to record those. for y'all. Oh, and then I'm almost done. I have like a couple more pages for my notes on Black Marxism, so then I can upload all of that together onto Discord. I did not take my ADHD medicine today, okay? I have a lot of thoughts. So I can upload that to Discord, but I have to pay $2.99 for it because it's like hella. Oh, I can make summaries? Girl, don't tell me twice. So I can upload all of that together. I'm so excited for that. Okay, sorry, just getting that out so I have a reminder. These were a part of the political, organizational, and ideological cultures that accompanied. Hey, we're learning as we go. Okay. These were a part of the political, organizational, and ideological cultures that accompanied the foreign workers to America. Theodore Draper observes, from the very outset, the American socialist movement was peculiarly indebted to the immigrants for both its progress and its problems. The first convention of the Socialist Labor Party in 1877 was composed of representatives of 17 German sections, 7 English, 3 Bohemian, 1 French, and a general women's section. Immigrants naturally assumed the role of teachers and organizers, but they were mainly concerned with teaching and organizing themselves. The Socialist Labor Party was never more than an American head on an immigrant body. As these peoples dispersed and or concentrated in the United States according to various social and economic determinants, their traditions were either conserved, adapted, or dissipated. This is like during the time of Ellis Island, like when a lot of people were coming in, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Because 1914, 1870, yeah. And then think about that in connection to when more immigrants were coming in, formerly enslaved people, Black people, African Americans, Africans were still receiving the like butt end of the stick. Is that how you say that reference? Is that how you say it? They was receiving trash, or they were not included. But sorry, keep going. Two ways in which they were conserved were through ethnic specific and industrial specific communities. The labor movement, whether it was a trade unionist, electoral party, or revolutionary, was largely organized on the basis of national, ethnic, and industrial groups. In the Socialist Party of 1914, the membership of the northeastern and midwestern states were largely Jewish? I don't like saying Jews because I saw too many people say, don't refer to me as a Jew if you're not Jew. And I was like, a Jewish person. And I was like, okay, valid. So Jewish, excuse me. Were largely Jewish people, Germans, Poles, Czechs, and Slovaks, Hungarians, South Slavs, and many others. And notice, okay, to that point, and notice how these same peoples, except for like Germans, I don't know about Czechs and Poles, but I know that like the Slavs and the Irish were originally, like they were part of the group that was originally called like the first Black people in terms of how racism was constructed. It's interesting to see those dynamics, like how it will shape over time. Later immigrant groups, however, formed parties or groupings that were still related to the socialist parties of their respective countries, of which so many had been members. These federations of immigrant workers played a special role in American socialism. This, then, was one critical contradiction in early American socialist development. The organizing principle was ethnicity, while at the same time nationalism, a logical conclusion of ethnicity endangered and frustrated socialist unity. Ethnicity dominated the movement organizationally, ideologically, conceptually, and theoretically. This objective contradiction was a persistent character of the socialist and labor movements and would reach critical proportions in response to both European and American events, i.e., the Franco-Prussian War in the 1870s, World War I, and ethnic competitions for jobs and its subsequent violence. Even among the minority sections of the socialist movement, the English language federations, there was a basic conflict between nationalism and socialism. Much of the membership of these federations was in fact made up from second-generation immigrant clusters. Among the factors involved in the decision to become socialists and communists, Gabriel Almond argued was the assimilative motive. Let me restate that statement. One second. Oh, that felt so good. Okay. Among the factors involved in the decision to become socialists and communists, Gabriel Almond argued, was the assimilative motive. Almond maintained that the English language federations were influenced by both I don't know what's going on with my brain. Bear with me. I appreciate it. Almond maintained that the English language federations were influenced by both the organizational priority of Americanization so as to influence the development of a Native American working class and their members' own socio-psychological needs. Girl, I saw this post that was talking about the Americanization of Black people in America and how like that Americanization is like the incorporation of Western ideals. So you see within the Black community, homophobia, misogyny, racism, right? And these are like those aspects of Americanization because America is a part of the West, and it's the diminishing of an Afrocentric lens. Interessante. The American Communist Party was formed then during a time of some theoretical and ideological confusion. In point of fact, the movement in the United States had broken down into so many competing ideological factions in the early 1920s that it became necessary for the Comintern to impose order, uniting them into a single party. The party that resulted was dominated by foreign language federations, the most powerful being the Russian and Finnish federations. The federations, though, were still often more concerned with the fortunes of the movement in their homelands than in America. Nationalism and nationalist rivalries were consequently a part of the party's historical character. When one adds to this situation the disputes inherited from the Second International concerning the nature of capitalism and the form when one adds to the situation the disputes inherited from the Second International concerning the nature of capitalism and the form the socialist revolution would assume, the appearance of Bolshevik hegemony could be understood to have been both a further force for chaos and order. When I was younger, I would say chacos instead of chaos, chacos. Because why is it spelled that way? Chaos. Don't make fun of me. The success of the Bolshevik Party gave the Russian Language Association an advantage. For a time in influencing party policy, The success of the Bolshevik Party gave the Russian Language Association an advantage for a time in influencing party policy, but it also intensified ideological disputes and theoretical quarrels since the Bolsheviks were a historical anomaly in classical Marxist terms. I feel like I should do a video on like what's Bolshevism, because girl, sometimes I don't know. I had to look it up myself. Let me know if you guys would want a video on that, or if I should, in like the next video, I can link like different videos that have already been made about it, because I feel like there has to be videos on YouTube that's like already made that like further discuss, like from people that are like experts, so you know what I mean. were a far-left faction of Marxist Russian Socialist Democratic Labor Party, which split. They're known for the revolutionary socialist current of Soviet Leninist and later Marxist-Leninist political thought, political regime associated with the formation of a rigidly centralized, cohesive, and disciplined party of social revolution focused on overthrowing the existing capitalist state. Wait, that one's from Wikipedia. They were trying, in the 1917 revolution that overthrew the imperial government and placed the Bolsheviks in power. Yeah, I'll find a video. But let me know if you're actually interested, or you just look it up yourself. But let me know. But a form of Russian nationalism had assumed dominance in the American movement as it had throughout the Comintern. Though this idea was acceptable to many in the American movement, it could also be expected to encounter opposition, especially among those peoples who had been historically subject to, how do you say this? Something Russia's imperialism. Let me know. T.S. Tsaris? Let's see if I said it right. Autocratic government of Russia that existed before 1917. Pronunciation, por favor.
Tsarist.
Tsarist. Oh, okay. Tsarist.
Tsarist.
Tsarist. Tsarists of Russia's imperialism. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Tsarist means a person who supported the Russian system of government by a tsar. Okay. 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 The embodiment of sovereign authority stood at the center of the Tsarist autocracy with the full power over the state and its people. Okay. In a movement dominated by national parties and sub-parties, the character of the Comintern and the consequent inflation of the political influence of Russian nationals in the United States was bound to produce or revitalize counter-nationalisms. The growing power of specifically Russian Jewish people in the movement created or exasperated cleavages within the communist movement that were not resolved even by the late 1920s. Regardless, the direct influence of the Bolsheviks on the American movement that had begun in as early as late 1916, months before its own spectacular successes, and nearly 3 years before the First World War. Are you good? I lost my place. No, I didn't. Regardless, the direct influence of the Bolsheviks on the American movement that had begun as early as late 1916, months before its own spectacular successes, and nearly 3 years before the First World Congress of the Communist International, would seldom be seriously challenged in the next 40 or 50 years. Okay, we're at 24 minutes, so I'll pause here, and then I'm just going to record the next part, or the next 3 sections, since it sets it up. Next is Black nationalism. Oh, actually, yeah, thanks for listening.